How do we fuel ourselves differently for high or low intensity sports? I'm Elle Kelly and I'm a sports dietitian, and we're going to break down the differences between fueling for high intensity and low intensity sports. Exercise intensity relates to how hard our body is working during an activity. And when we talk about high and low intensity exercise, we're usually talking about anaerobic and aerobic exercise. Anaerobic exercise is defined as any activity that breaks down the stores of glucose in the body for energy without using oxygen. These types of exercises are usually intense and short in duration, like HIIT, powerlifting, and sprinting. Aerobic exercise is the opposite of anaerobic, and aerobic activity uses large muscle groups and can be maintained continuously, like with cycling, jogging, or long-distance running, swimming, and walking. Let's think about how the nutrient needs might differ between different sports. All nutrients are important in the diet, and especially in the diet of someone who is active, but the amount and ratio of these nutrients may change depending on the type of sport. Someone running half marathons is going to need a lot more carbohydrates than someone who casually does a 5K, and even more than somebody who does brisk walking. Speaking of carbohydrates, let's start there. When we exercise, our body needs to start producing energy quicker than it does when it is at rest. Both fat and carbohydrates can provide fuel for exercise, but the type, intensity, and duration of exercise will typically dictate whether carbohydrates or fats are used. Carbohydrates are required to fuel most activities, but there is a greater reliance on them during high-intensity sports. Due to the intense nature of sports like sprinting or high rocks, there is a reliance on a constant supply of energy throughout a session or an event. We can store carbohydrates in the form of glycogen in our muscles and in our liver. And in the absence of food, this glycogen can be converted back into glucose and drip-fed into our bloodstream to maintain stable blood glucose levels. When glycogen stores are at full capacity, they can normally provide us with energy for up to 24 hours, and we usually top them up as the day goes on. However, the rate at which we use glycogen is higher when exercising, and glycogen stores can become depleted even quicker through high-intensity sports. To maintain high performance levels during intense exercise and prevent early onset fatigue, it's important to ensure that glycogen stores are topped up before going into a training session. In some sports of longer duration, carbohydrates may even be required during a workout. For example, sessions that last longer than 90 minutes or 60 minutes if at a high intensity, or if you haven't had adequate fueling before a training session, or if you're training twice in a day or having sessions very close together, because this makes it harder to ensure glycogen stores are primed again for the next session. And also if you're participating in multi-day events where again the time for glycogen resynthesis is limited. It is recommended that 30 grams of carbohydrates is consumed per hour when exercise lasts between 1 to 2 hours, and 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrates is consumed when exercise exceeds 2 hours. The ability to train regularly and to train well will be impacted by the ability to restore carbohydrates so that glycogen is available for subsequent sessions. The body's ability to recreate glycogen is at its peak during the initial few hours following exercise, but this can continue over a long period of time. And the more depleted our glycogen stores are, the longer it will take to replenish these stores. During the first 2 hours following a session, glycogen replenishment occurs at about 150% more quickly than the normal rate, and after 4 hours, returns to its normal rate. The recommendations for carbohydrates range from 3 to 5 grams per kilogram per day for very low intensity and more skill-based training, going up to 5 to 7 grams per kilogram per day for general training needs, and go up towards 8 to 12 grams per kilogram per day for more intense training and endurance athletes. If you are going on a leisurely walk or doing some gentle yoga, carbohydrates are not going to be needed in such quantities, but are still an important component of the diet and should be providing at least 45 to 50% of our overall energy requirements, with that percentage shifting upwards with the more active we are. Next up is protein. Protein requirements will very much vary based on the intensity of sport. The recommended daily intake of protein is 0.75 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, but these requirements are increased for active individuals, ranging from 1.4 to 2 grams depending on the type of sport. It is thought that strength and power-based exercises increase protein requirements further than endurance exercise, so recommendations for strength training specifically are to aim for the higher end of this range, between 1.6 to 2 grams per kilogram per day. There is less research on protein requirements for sports that are intermittent in nature, like football and basketball, but protein intakes within the range of 1.4 to 1.7 grams per kilogram per day is recommended. Unlike carbohydrates and fats, protein is the one macronutrient that we cannot store in the body, and so it is advised to aim to include protein at regular intervals throughout the day. The body is in a constant state of muscle protein breakdown and repair, but the rate of this increases with exercise, which emphasizes the importance of protein post-workout. So, how soon after a workout should you be consuming protein? The rate of muscle protein synthesis, the process where we build new muscle tissue, is highest within the first few hours after exercise, which is why it's recommended to try to get 20 to 40 grams to maximally stimulate MPS. This will support your recovery and subsequent performance. However, the rate remains elevated for hours after this, as recovery is an ongoing process. And regardless of your goals, protein is so important to support your recovery so that you can perform to the best of your ability. Make sure you're prioritizing protein in your meals regardless of how intense or not intense your training is. And what about fats? Fats provide a source of energy which is important for supporting energy requirements, which are even higher in those who are active. Fats are also essential for the production and function of hormones, the absorption of nutrients such as vitamins A, D, E, and K, and for providing structure to cell membranes and tissues. There are no specific recommendations for fat intake for athletes, and the dietary recommendations for fat for athletes is pretty similar to the general guidelines. Whilst fats can be used as fuel for exercise, they cannot be broken down as quickly as carbohydrates, and so for high-intensity exercise, carbohydrates are the preferred fuel source. The amount of fat you should aim for will depend on your sport and protein and carbohydrate requirements, as it is recommended that once protein and carbohydrate needs are covered, the remaining energy should come from dietary fats. For those who regularly train, including sources of omega-3 fatty acids or supplementing with omega-3 may be beneficial for supporting recovery from strength training. A recent study found that omega-3 supplementation reduced muscle stiffness, and another study found that omega-3 fatty acids consumed post-workout resulted in pain reduction 48 hours following exercise. Naturally, when it comes to sports nutrition, we tend to focus on macronutrients, and micronutrients like vitamins and minerals are often overlooked. Exercise can cause increased levels of oxidative stress, which produces free radicals, and can cause inflammation, which can contribute to impaired muscle repair and performance. Antioxidants are molecules found in fruit and vegetables and can help to protect against free radical damage by neutralizing free radicals. Vitamins A, C, and E are all antioxidants, and these can be found mostly in plant foods like fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, as well as in some dairy and in eggs. You can get all the antioxidants you need through a balanced and varied diet, and it is actually not recommended to take antioxidant supplements, as these can interfere with muscle repair and growth. Ideally, we should be including fruits and vegetables in every meal, but something to be aware of when training at higher intensities is fiber intake in the lead up to a session or an event. Everyone is different, but it is quite common for athletes to experience gastrointestinal symptoms like cramping, nausea, or bloating during or after training. So it is recommended to limit fiber intake around sessions to reduce the risk of this. For low-intensity sports, the effects of this might not be as evident, and as I mentioned, everyone is different, so don't be afraid to play around with timings and types of foods to find what works for you. Another frequently overlooked aspect of nutrition is hydration. Whilst the intensity of a sport will impact sweat losses, so will other factors like climate, clothing, and duration. Dehydration can impact physical and mental performance, such as increasing the perception of how hard exercise feels and your concentration levels. Dehydration can also lead to nausea and other gastrointestinal problems during and after exercise. Aiming for a clear or pale yellow coloured urine is a useful way to measure adequate hydration. And depending on how much we sweat, there is a loss of both fluid and electrolytes during training, and it is important to aim to remain hydrated during exercise, as losing just 2% of body weight due to dehydration can significantly impact exercise performance. Water is usually sufficient for most low-intensity training sessions, and having some food after a session can help to restore electrolyte levels. But as intensity and duration increases, this might not be enough. And only drinking water and not replacing electrolytes after intense or prolonged sessions could lead to an imbalance in sodium and fluid levels. There is also evidence that indicates that without adequate hydration, it is harder to absorb carbohydrates. If you're regularly having gels or other carbohydrate sources during a training session, you should be ensuring that you're remaining hydrated to support the absorption and to reduce the risk of GI-related symptoms. So, how have you been fueling your sessions? For more specific and tailored advice to support your training, speak to a sports dietitian or nutritionist. And for more great evidence-based nutrition information, be sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button.